good meeting.
Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
I'm almost ready for that marathon.
Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Lincolnville Selectmen's meeting. It is the 25th of November. Selectman Barrows, would you care to read the quote of the evening,
Certainly.
please?
Truly successful decision-making relies on a balance between deliberate and instinctive thinking. Malcolm Gladwell.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the podium for any non-agenda items.
Have to be here, right?
Yes, sir.
Evening, my name's Gary Neville. I'm here for the Lincolnville Boat Club. I had some papers for anyone who's interested. So I had 3 items to talk over.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
I need one more.
Thank you.
I'll get the one.
It's all right, I'll find one. Look over Dave's shoulder. Thank you.
So we've been in existence about 15 years now. We're a true nonprofit. Our books show we about break even every year. Then our donors put us over the top as far as being able to give scholarships and do improvements to the building that we bought from the town. Last 3 years we've been averaging about 120, 125 students in the day program. That's children. And 50 or 60 adults at night. So what I was going to talk about with these 3 items, I think it was before you previously to look at the possibility of a kayak rack down at Breezemere Park. So I thought I'd come tonight just to talk about it, and then I know we'll probably need to go to the rec committee for further discussion. I've told the rec committee I was coming tonight, and they thought it was a good idea to get things started as far as the conversation. So I did this quick sketch showing where we thought would be a good spot for the kayak rack, which would be down near the water, just before the concrete slabs start, opposite the floats that are on the right-hand side, looking out at the pond. There's a grass area and there's trees and shrubs. It wouldn't take any parking. The one side of the kayak rack will be into the bushes, but you'll be able to push the kayaks in and still use it. The boat club would probably use 3 or 4 of the spots for 8 weeks. And we'd be happy to construct that, install it for the town, and the town could use, there'd probably be 6 or 8 slots, so there'd be half of it that could be used while the boat club was in session, then they'd be able to use, everybody'd be able to use it for the rest of the time. It's also portable, so if the location didn't work out and someone thought there was a better location, it could be easily moved after a year or 2 if it was tried and there were some issues of some sort. So that was the first item that we wanted to talk about and offer to construct and install. The second, Dave knows better than anyone probably, the town floats that are adjacent to the boat ramp. The plastic decking has had a lot of serious holes in it, and I think it's lucky no one's broken an ankle like someone's experienced recently. But So we have a donor that I think will donate untreated wood decking, and then the boat club could redeck those floats if you liked with wood decking instead of the graded plastic decking. And then I thought that the surplus that isn't weathered and showing failure could be reused on the other floats as it was needed, which I think is probably going to happen. So that was the second item, that I think we could supply the decking and install the decking on those floats. Then the third item, wanted to check on the status of the sidewalk going from the crosswalk at the boat club down to the Norton Pond Road. We talked about 6-foot wide sidewalk. About a year ago this time, Dave Kinney, some people from the Veterans Memorial Committee and myself, we laid out a 6-foot wide sidewalk that at the time everybody thought was a workable solution. I know there's been discussion about what material to use, and I say that Breezemere Park has paved sidewalks in it now. So that's all I wanted to say about that. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Have you had any conversations with the rec committee since they brought up a number of these items last year during budget time?
No, we just knew that the kayak rack was to be studied further. That's all we knew about.
Yeah, there were a number of questions that we posed to the budget committee members who were present at the time, and I'd encourage you to have a chat with them about it, because it definitely wasn't something to be workshopped at the time during
Sure.
budget planning process.
And what we'd heard was that there's concern about taking parking, so this won't take any parking. It'll be on the grass.
I think there was a little bit more than that. Who was gonna police it? What happens if it gets damaged? If someone from Joe Q Public used it and their boat got stolen, who's liable, that type of thing.
Who's going to manage the spots? Who's going to manage who gets to, if the boat club is using, roughly 50% of the racks, who is going to be the managing body to decide who gets to use the other ones? Is it going to be a free-for-all? Liability issues, maintenance issues, on and on and on. All of those cumbersome.
Well, I mean, we could put it in and use it for the school session and take it back out. The issue for the boat club is that if we have, say, 20 students in a class, so we need at least 10 boats for them to do something in. And we dry sail on the floats that we have, about 6 or 7 boats. Some years we've wet sailed or had a mooring with a boat or two on it. But then the kayaks typically need to be carried down. So and then we've bought trailers to make that easier, but as we talked about last time we were here, there's those logs that are across the grass on the way from the crosswalk to the Norton's Pond Road. So it forces these trailers to be out on the road. And this is staff and children that are moving those boats down. So if we move the boats down, that's fine, but a way to do less of that is if we had a rack down near the pond, and then the boats can just be launched and put back on the rack. So if it made it easier for the town, we could put it in and take it back out when the classes are done.
Well, rather than trying to dissect these 3 very different and significant conversations that you've posed to us, I mean,
Yes.
number 2 really what I'm seeing there is you're just calling to our attention, our need to deal with pieces of our infrastructure and factor that in to our budget process. So I guess,
Yep.
unless the board has other ideas, I would ask David to follow up with you, and I see at least a couple of potential future agenda items for the board to get into and either identify interest in or not interest in, and then the way forward
Sure.
of how to address these
Yeah.
items.
Yeah, I thought this way you can't take a vote, so it can just be talked about.
Yeah, yep.
Start the conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's much better timing than a year ago,
Yeah.
for sure.
We appreciate it.
And it didn't look like there was a big agenda tonight, so I thought I'd liven it up for you.
Thank you, Gary.
Appreciate that.
David, did you make a note to remind me to remind you to have a conversation about that?
Even put an arrow next to it.
So, could I just ask one question,
Yes.
just so that I can have something to think about? It takes me a while to think about most everything.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. How many, considering you're saying about 125 kids yearly?
Yep.
Okay.
Last 3 years.
Yeah, okay. So how many boats or how many kayaks average are you talking about storing in a piece of equipment down there yearly?
Well, I mean,
Or is it, or if you have more kids, you gotta have more kayaks?
if there's wind, they go sailing.
Yep.
But if there isn't wind and it's a pond, then we want to have other choices that they can do. They could try to sail, but if they don't want to try to sail, then they can row boats or kayak, or we have those stand-up paddle boards. We have a bunch of different things. I think four kayaks would certainly.
So that's what
that'd be
you're
4 or less.
transporting, that's what you're transporting down and then transporting back up there. And I understand the safety aspect of this,
Yes.
but I'm just trying to get an idea of what your need is and kind of looking at maybe future expansion and what's actually gotta be there, whether it can be portable or whether it really should be fixed.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
okay, that's good,
Yeah.
that's good,
And,
thank you, Gary.
you know, if it was 6, it might be 6, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying 4, and we could work with 4. And we've looked at other racks that are in adjacent towns,
Mhm.
and they're pretty simple to build. And
Yeah.
that's what we'd build and
Okay,
provide.
thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Anything else for the Citizens Forum for any non-agenda items? Seeing nothing, let's move along to the administrator's report.
Just a couple of tidbits. You had a handout that was left at each of your stations. I had a nice visit with a Waldo County deputy at my home Sunday morning at 8 something. Which was a little disarming to see somebody come to the house. Wonder what was up. They just delivered a copy of the public hearing notice on the Waldo County budget, proposed budget, which Dave's gonna let me borrow his so I can tell the folks at home that the public hearing is, I believe that's a Friday, December 6th at 5:30 in the County Commissioner's courtroom at 39B Spring Street in Belfast. And I copied just the summary sheets for you folks. The budget is, I don't know, 100 pages, and I didn't want to kill too many trees. If somebody wants a copy, we certainly can make people a copy. If the public is interested, we have a copy here that they're more than welcome to look at during normal business hours. And I'm sure Waldo County probably has copies up to Belfast somewhere that you're welcome to look at.
And if you'd like to watch the previous budget committee meeting, it's on the Town of Lincolnville YouTube channel. It's only 3.5 hours long. So we heard from, I think, every department in that meeting. So if you're curious, the reasoning behind the budgets put forward by each department, they spell it out there.
Awesome, Ken.
Otherwise, dog licenses are all due at the end of the year. You can do those online through the town's website, or you can do them here in person at the town office, again during normal business hours. You must have up-to-date information regarding rabies vaccinations. We're still slowly but surely putting winter sand in the barn. They've been working daily at, well, maybe not weekends, but daily at it. So we're not there yet, but it's getting closer to full every day. Hopefully winter holds off a while longer. Although it certainly seems like it. We did manage to get our culvert locations patched back in with pavement on the warm Friday last week, which was good that Mother Nature cooperated a little bit with us on that. So there were a few other little things that we wanted to do around town before winter set in, but they'll be there in the spring, I'm sure. And unless you've got something else, I think that's all I want to share besides what's on the agenda.
Any questions for David? Okay, let's move along to upcoming meetings and announcements.
All meetings are here at the town office unless announced otherwise. Lakes and Ponds Committee meets Tuesday, November 26th at 7 p.m. Planning Board is not meeting Wednesday night, even though it's on the agenda. The town office will be closed for the Thanksgiving holiday on Thursday and Friday of this week, 28th and 29th. The Lincolnville Board of Selectmen is meeting with the Camden Board of Selectmen on Tuesday, December 3rd at a time to be determined at the Camden Town Office regarding McGuntacook dams. And the Board of Selectmen meet next on Monday, December 7th, 6 p.m.
Any concept of when we can get a confirmation of time?
Well, the Audra was going to check with Bob to see if they wanted to have a workshop before their meeting so that it could be in a little less formal setting or as part of their regular meeting, and she has not confirmed back, but I would assume, I don't even know what time their meetings start, so early
Okay.
evening would be my guess.
Okay. Any other questions there? Are there any upcoming community events anyone would care to share? Yes.
Christmas by the Sea festivities will be not this weekend, but the following weekend. In Lincolnville, the bonfire gets touched off about 3 o'clock. Caroling starts shortly thereafter, and Santa will arrive at some point thereafter. And then there'll be, I believe, something at the LAA on the first floor of the LAA after Santa departs.
Standing guard at the stairs there.
Just about. And a big thank you to Richard Lerman and his crew who have put the lights on the Christmas tree at the beach, and the LAA group for supplying the new lights for Richard's crew to put up. And those will be on, well, they're probably on now, but certainly will be on this weekend.
Great.
Oh, I have one question.
Sure.
I saw a post on the Google group that the lights were starting, the street lights were starting to be installed. That
Oh, yeah.
complete?
That was the other thing under administrator's report that I neglected to tell you. The sidewalk lights, the conversion from the high pressure sodium to the LED is complete to beach. With the exception of one side shield or back shield that I'm not sure if that had been installed as yet, but we have the part and just needs the electrician to go up and put that on.
That's great.
But yeah,
Did that go as expected?
Yeah, they're up and working, so it went as expected.
They were putting it up in that drizzly, nasty
Yeah.
weather. I felt really bad for them, but yeah,
Great.
they're snazzy
What
looking.
did we do, what's being done with the old fixtures? Do we,
We made that part of the,
okay,
you take, we
yeah, okay,
are rid of, and
good.
any salvage is yours.
Court charge. Batteries, brake shoes, court charge.
Okay, if there's no other upcoming community events anyone cares to share, let's move on to the meeting minutes from the 12th of November.
I move that the board approve the November 12th, 2019 meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And rapidly moving along, we have some committee chair and department head updates. And not to keep you waiting too long, I'll invite our representative from the McGonagall Dam Committee up to the podium so we can.
Well, I don't know what to really tell you.
Well, we just want to meet you.
No,
Well, tell the folks watching at home who you are.
one of the things is they're not having too many meetings.
No.
And we normally would have 2 a year. And we'd have like Aquamarine Tech would come down and go over the dam, and then they'd bring all their information to us and the price it would cost to fix it. But we haven't had that, and I don't think there's been anything done since 2007, basically.
What was the last meeting that you were invited to participate in when it came to planning anything having to do with the dams?
It's got to be 10 years. They put in trash racks. They did that new. That was back in around 2007, and they put the boardwalk across the east dam, and what they're doing, they're not keeping the dam at the right level. Right now, we're way low. I don't understand why, unless somebody down at Camden's having some work done.
Yeah, they are in fact engaging in some pretty significant repairs of the West Dam
Well,
as we speak, which I really only know of from watching Camden's
they,
videos of their meetings.
the last meeting we were to, Dave, can you remember when?
I'd have to look back through this voluminous notebook to find it, but I think if we turn back the hands of time quite a ways, I'll roll it back about 16 years, because that's how long I've been here. George was already on the committee, right?
Yeah, I was on it.
For anybody that doesn't know, this is George Winslow, who's a Lincolnville resident, been on the McGonagall Dams Committee for decades. Is that a fair statement?
Since 99, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other two members are Ernie Littlefield, who'd been on since at least 1990, because I found something in the notebook of that, and Matt Lawson, who's relatively newer to the committee, but probably hasn't been involved in a whole lot. But
I think Ernie probably won't be doing it anymore,
yeah,
and so that means you got to find another member.
you mean after 29 or 30 years, he's
going to
he's
give it
gonna
up.
what, give it up? Ernie, if you're watching at home, good for you. And please correct me, George. I gave the board a fair amount of information, which was probably like, why did you give me all this stuff? But back in the 80s, the town of Camden accepted the east and west dams. And they got a little bit of money. And it wasn't too long after, sometime in the 90s, I guess it was late 90s because I got a date here, the Maine Emergency Management Agency came and did inspections of the east and west dams. They were going statewide because they'd had some problems with dams. And they issued an inspection report which highlighted a number of possible deficiencies. And and the town of Camden, as the owners of those dams, went out and hired an engineering firm to look at the dams, not necessarily to refute what MEMA had said, but to say, you know, the sky isn't falling. They do require attention. And when I showed up on the scene, Skip Day, who had been the administrator prior, had served on the committee, right,
Yeah.
George?
Yeah, I wasn't there with that. I was
When Skip
scared.
wasn't?
No.
Okay. And typically, the group would meet, as George said, once or twice a year, and we'd sit down and we'd get an inspection report, which I included a sample in here from an engineering outfit. And then they'd also, and they'd outline work for the coming year, or for, be aware of this in future years. And oftentimes, what was the name of that, Aquamarine?
Yeah,
Or Aquamarine?
aquamarine.
Would do the work, repair work, or would also do the underwater inspection part of the, because obviously you can't see more than half the dam because it's underwater. And we'd sit down at Camden and go over with, at the time, Ken Bailey was the dam agent, and he'd say, here's what is outlined, and here's the rough cost estimates, and here's the other expenses associated with the dam. Does that seem reasonable? And the group would decide it seemed pretty reasonable and forward that on to the Camden Select Board, as well as the Lincolnville Board, because Lincolnville had been contributing financially to the upkeep and maintenance. And in a nice way, Camden has gone through some changes in the relative recent past, with new and different town managers. Unfortunately, Ken Bailey met his demise. And then Ross Parker was running was the dam agent, as the guy who also did the wastewater in Camden. And then Ross retired, and another town manager came and went in Camden. And now Dave Bolstridge is the wastewater guy in Camden, also the dam agent. And I think some of the things over time kind of slipped through the cracks.
Yeah.
Is
They,
that-
they did a bunch of work. They drilled a hole down underneath the east dam, and, because they had some leaks down in there, and they filled that with cement, hoping that would take care of that, but that was 10, 12 years ago. And they also put epoxy on the inside of the dam when the water was low, But the west dam, they only use the west dam when they have to let water out pretty fast. They have trouble with that west dam with the gate. They can't get it shut back up good, so they don't like to use it. And they regulate the lake with the east dam. So that's basically all I can tell you. We have to pay a third of everything that happens down there. And I think that's a state law that we have to pay.
We don't think so.
You don't think so?
As far as we can tell, that was just something that was adopted by Camden.
Actually, Lincolnville don't get anything out of the lake, of those dams, really. I mean, Camden's got to keep them two dams up because of the river. If they didn't have them dams, then the river would be dry. So Camden really has the say of the whole. Well, they do have the say of the whole thing. If they want to drain it, they drain it. They never ask us. They just go ahead and do it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we've been faced with, George, and I know that's why the board wanted to talk with anybody from the dam committee that could come, is the project that's now underway or is at least awarded by the town of Camden, involves the West Dam, I believe, and the sluice gate or whatever type of gate it is at one point they were looking at I think they budgeted close to $300,000.
Yeah.
And they were gonna borrow their own money and pay themselves back.
Which they're still doing.
Right, which they got voter
Yeah,
approval for, so I mean, it's certainly legitimate, but the concern from this group had been, We don't have $100,000 to kick in. If it were gonna be a $300,000 project, we were paying a third. And the other part of that being, we might be able to get it with voter approval, but we couldn't commit because we didn't have either the money in hand or voter approval for it. So the board here wanted to take a step back and have a better understanding of what's going on and the benefits before we jumped in with some fairly substantial monies.
As far as I know, the last thing they said that our share was gonna be something like $75,000 for what they're doing now.
Well, it's certainly gonna be, I mean, if it were a perfect world and we were following the past policy, it would be a third of whatever they spent.
Yeah.
But again, part of the concern was that the communication where some of these things aren't necessarily completely discussed or vetted if we haven't had a meeting. And
Well, the last one was you and I was there. I can't remember when it was.
hasn't been, it wasn't too many years ago, they kind of rolled out the potential for bad news, but we've seemed to have gotten away from the engineering inspections
That's right.
on a periodic basis, so there was
That should
more
be-
planning. And, I mean, this is
Those should be every year.
the current explanation is this is, I hate to use the word emergency, but closer to an emergency situation for them. Dams are pretty big infrastructure and should last a long time, and they have lasted a long time, but there needs to be that constant maintenance and knowing what's coming, and that's been part of the concern.
That's why Ken, he would have that every year. Then the bill didn't get too high. We have $20,000 that we might have to pay.
Well, and that's where the conversation changed really, is that it's one thing for us to ask the taxpayers to raise and appropriate a kind of consistent amount of money. But when we started hearing through the grapevine, basically, in the newspaper, that they're talking about maybe they're gonna put in fish passages, maybe they're gonna rebuild the dam, maybe they're gonna start spending millions of dollars, that's when we started saying, wait a second. Yeah, so, and, if in the paperwork we're on the hook for a third of that, I began to wonder, are you guys being kept in the loop? Are you being part, as our representatives?
They're not keeping up with it.
Yeah, and that doesn't make me feel good about having our taxpayers' dollars going through a process that we're not included in at all. It doesn't sit well with me.
The Aquatech Marine would come in, they'd send divers down, look around, and find the cracks in the walls, because they have to be patched from the inside. And they had to, like I said, they put new fish racks in, not fish tracks, but trash racks and things like that. But we haven't had anything. And they have the meetings in February and I'm not here. So that makes it hard.
So who calls the meetings, and is there a chair of the committee?
Dave's been doing all that.
I've been calling the meetings. They alert us when they want to have a meeting.
They being the
They
select
being,
board, or?
well, usually it's Janice down to Camden. I don't know who alerts her,
Okay.
but probably Dave Bolstridge or Audra. And then we call the members and see if they're available. And sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. But it's been, yes, in answer, the other part of your question is there has been in the past a dam committee chair. Rick Knowlton was for a while. That was the last one I remember, probably every time they get together, but Rick hasn't been on the committee in years.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think we roll the hands of time back enough. Ken Bailey used to tell the town manager that they needed to have a committee meeting, get together, and then she'd call me, and this is back when Roberta was there. And then there was quite a gap after Roberta Smith left and Pat Finnegan was the town manager there, of quite a period of time when we didn't have any meetings at all. And some of you, lately you've been on the board, and David, we got a bill a couple of years ago for like 3 or 4 years worth of work
Yep.
that just never got invoiced to us.
Yeah.
We paid up, but
For a while there, the town was having was raising so much money and put it into a slush fund.
put it into a reserve fund. You might call it a slush fund. We had some dedicated funds,
Yeah.
and the other brings back to something I've read through in the work. At one point, Lincolnville's goal was to get up around $40,000 in that fund because there was an anticipated cost of ongoing upkeep, maintenance, and whatnot, and then there was a list of things that were going to be picked away at, and they wanted to have some monies in case there was something bigger that happened. And then back a number of years ago, we had more than $40,000 in that account. We being the town of Lincolnville, we hold it here. And then when the tax cap measure kicked in, it became harder and harder to just set aside monies without an express purpose beyond McGonagall dams when we had more than what we thought we ought to build up to. So we cut back on setting aside monies.
Yep. Any other questions for Mr. Winslow, or can we let him get out of the hot seat?
I just want to say thank you for coming in, George, and it's good to see you.
Yeah,
It
same
is.
here.
I haven't
Nice to
seen
meet
you for
you.
100 years, it seems.
Thank you, George.
But
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
we appreciate your efforts on this committee so much, and I wish that they had been utilized a little bit more in recent years.
But I don't know I understand now why the lake is so low if they're working on the west dam.
Yeah, I don't know if they've
I don't know if they've started,
or
but
if this is in preparation for, or
yeah.
maybe it's leaking like crazy, George.
They shut the dams up. They'd come up in 3 or 4 days anyway if it rained.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the last couple of years, have the levels been relatively consistent with the policy?
Well, after poor Ken passed away, the other guy was on it. He did a good job. He kept it down, so we didn't get flooded out.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's starting to get high again, in the spring of the year.
Mm.
And this time of year, from October to ice out, it's supposed to be down 22 to 24 inches from the top of the spillway. So,
It's
right
It's
now,
pretty low.
I have a feeling the lake's down probably 4 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Thank you, we
I
appreciate it.
it. I don't know how much you all got through this wonderful pile of information that David provided, but I thought it was interesting how 35 years ago, the purpose of the McGonagall Dam Committee was, well, first it was comprised of equal representation from Camden and Lincolnville, and that the purpose of the committee was to advise and assist the Camden Selectmen in their decision-making processes. And so, without belaboring the topic that much, I don't know if any of you have paid attention to what the Camden Select Board have been doing recently with the dams, but I did watch their November 6th meeting. Also with particular interest to the conversation they were having with regarding emergency medical services, but that's our next conversation. But they did approve a bid to work on the West Dam with a contingency. So I don't know if that particular bid had been approved, but they had set aside last year $300,000 for this work. It looks as though it's going to cost less, but I feel that all of this is very representative of our neighboring municipality engaging in some pretty significant work financially. And were we to hold up our agreement of the 20-year-old agreement that a select board made 20 years ago, and you know, and these conversations go back, 35 years, we could be on the hook for a lot of money that we have absolutely no formal mechanism to be involved in. And so in this meeting that we're going to have on the 3rd, I would encourage all of you to do a little bit of homework with regards to where we've been, what's coming down the pipeline from Camden's perspective, and what our goals and objectives are as a town. Because I am not okay with our taxpayers having to contribute 30% of whatever they dream up over there without having any sort of mechanism for us to safeguard that our taxpayers' dollars are going to be protected. So I think that's all I'll say on that, unless anyone else has any
No,
other
that makes
thoughts.
a lot of sense. I mean, we should be at least in the we should be in the conversation.
Well,
There's
and when we,
decisions to be made that are going to cost, a third of a big budget, and we should.
yeah, and when we have institutional knowledge in our committee members, they should be called upon
Absolutely.
to participate.
I would personally love a field trip to the East and West Dam. I've never seen them up close before our December 3rd meeting. I don't know if that's other members are interested, if that's possible.
Well, the difficulty is that it's not our municipality at that point, it's our neighbors, but, it's definitely good to, and I don't know if you've looked through these engineering reports at all, but, really, I say this all the time to David Kinney, is that I think the conversation we keep getting back to with our neighboring municipality is not necessarily whether we're talking about, it's the widget. It's the mechanism by which these decisions are made and the monies are applied. That's the problem. It could be our joint collection of dried butterflies for all we know. Like, it doesn't matter what the thing is. The problem is the process and how much it could potentially cost us. That's the issue. But certainly having an awareness of the widget that we're talking about is...
Big widget.
Yes, big, wet, cold, yes.
I'd be on Selectman Gerritson's idea for anybody that's interested. I can reach out to Dave Bolstridge, the dam agent, and say, hey, we're going to have a conversation down in Camden coming up. Can I get a few people over at the East and
Yep.
West Dams? And I'd go with you, but I'm not going out on that. in the condition I'm in. Otherwise, I'd be
We
there.
can wrap you in bubble wrap.
But I certainly can,
Put you in one of those balls, those clear balls.
yeah, float me down.
I certainly don't
But
need to go. I've fallen off both of them, so I know
Oh,
exactly
yeah.
what they're. Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, but it is important to understand the context, yeah, for sure.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But if anybody else wants to go, otherwise I'll reach out to Dave and try to coordinate schedules for the two of you, Josh. and-
Okay. And so moving along, we now have a conversation with our representative from Northeast Mobile Health Services to chat about our emergency medical service.
Can I tell George that he'd be a welcome participant on the 3rd if he's available?
Yes, absolutely.
We can let him know when that is.
Yes, please, thank you.
Joe Conley, Director of Operations, Northeast Mobile Health Services.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, we invited you here. I wanted David to invite you here primarily so that we could talk about the elephant in the room. And I personally feel very grateful that our that we were offered the opportunity from Northeast Mobile Health to extend our contract 2 years. And so we're looking at roughly, what, a year and a half until ish, yeah. And so considering that our other members of the consortium who drug their feet significantly, they have 7 months left on their contract-ish.
Yeah.
So, you guys have been hitting the marks. I mean, your quarterly reports are very clear in all of the parameters that were set forth in the contract. You're hitting those marks. Largely, it seems that the participants in your service are feeling satisfied. We have a particular biased member sitting here. So I just would love to hear from you, so that our people listening at home and, just so that it can go on the record as we continue on in these conversations, where Lincolnville will be expected to be in, say, another 6 months. What do we need to start thinking about and planning for in terms of any future relationship we might have the opportunity to have with Northeast Mobile Health, considering circumstances might change?
Well, we're contracted still for, the year and a half that's still left there.
Yeah.
There's no intention or anything of changing that. Of course, we'll be, starting the renew process again. We'd like to get that done earlier than later. I know budgeting season slows things down, and we finally get through one contract, and we have, we've got to start working on the next one. So we're still talking to the other communities of the four towns of the consortium, but we're still obligated. We're still here, and we'll be working with David and you guys to figure out what the next contracts look like whenever we're ready to start.
And do you feel, I'm sure you guys are crunching numbers all the time. In terms of affordability, in terms of what our town could be expected. I'm just thinking worst case scenario. Say if a member or two of the consortium decide to go in a completely different direction and we don't have that subsidy to contribute to the contract, what would we be looking at?
I can't give you any numbers on that, just because I don't know what it would look like. Again, we're constantly looking at it, trying to find efficiencies, figuring out what the actual cost is. I couldn't give you a number at this point on that. So, not really the answer you're looking for, I know, but it's the only one that I can give you right now is that I don't know what it looks like if one would drop out. And
You guys haven't explored that yet?
Not fully. But again, like you said, we're always looking at it. Look at it monthly. The numbers show that. We're with no crystal ball here to be able to say what exactly ended up happening.
Sure. Yeah.
We're really, Lincolnville's the third largest user out of 4, which really means we're not a large user of your service.
Still a user.
Yes. Oh, yeah. But Yeah, I mean, I can sympathize where it adds to your challenge when you don't know what.
Right, I don't
Others
know
are.
what it looks like. I mean, it's the answer would be the same no matter which community asked me that question. If, you know, the bigger user dropped out, or the next biggest user, or even the smallest one, the answer is I'd have to look at it. We'd have to go back and we'd have to figure out how we spread it out, how we separate it, and where we go from there.
Yep. Well, I think what I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I know I've had a number of conversations with David, and the board has had various conversations, but I definitely don't want to end up 30 days to, you know, termination of the contract trying to come up with another plan.
Right.
Which is unfortunately the way that it's been going lately. And so I just want our town to be as proactive as possible. And so, and to include you, considering that you are who we are partnered with to provide this service. But I think having as open and transparent conversations as we can, so that as we're moving forward in this process, you know, if we continue to do business together, great. But if we say, for instance, you're going to say it's going to cost you an extraordinary amount more to keep us, I would rather have us start having those conversations sooner rather than later, so that we can make a plan.
Right.
So, you know, not to try to force your hand, but I would love for us to be able to have that, you know, as realistic a conversation of, you know, plan A, plan B, plan C.
And I think an answer to answer your question will be better when we get closer. And we're a little too far out now to be able to, you know, to have that, because right now nothing's changing. We're still servicing the four communities. Everything's there in place, so it's hard to say. But if we got closer to a renewal on the contract, would be easier to
But
answer
we're
the question.
looking that far out. So
Right, and
you know,
and I'm not saying I'm not. I
But-
just don't have any answers at this
Yeah.
point to.
the concern is we're one of two smaller
Right.
towns.
Yep.
And if the other two towns don't go with it, then that's a concern with us, and a financial concern, so that's why we're asking.
Yep, no, understandable.
Because we are looking that far out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we want to be able to, again, you know, there's a theme here, you know, the widget, you know, but we have to identify what the service is and can we afford it? You know, is it a service that we like, and is it affordable for our taxpayers? And finding that intersection of what we desire and what we can afford. And not letting it go too long, because we effectively have this budget and then next budget. So it just, you know, municipal timelines are both excruciatingly long and painful, and also there's not enough time to get anything done, you know, so we essentially have, you know, a handful of meetings in order to be able to figure out what our trajectory is in terms of.
I can go back to my CEO. I'll bring the information back, see what we can start working on, and see if I can bring something to you maybe after the first of the year. Would that be that we can at least start a conversation or something?
Yeah, Joe, please correct me, and you may not be able to pull things from your memory, just like I can from mine. Camden and Rockport both signed one-year contracts with Northeast.
Correct.
For EMS services. And within that, they had a little different verbiage or phraseology about renewal and having some sort of town conversation early in the coming year, wasn't it January?
Yeah, we were supposed to have, I believe, an answer by January, so, but the CEO, like I said, Robert Russell, he dealt with that, and he'll be, you know, we're getting close to that time frame.
Yeah, I mean, have you, are they, you know, we're not in tune necessarily completely with everything they're doing, are they moving towards that?
I haven't heard any updates on that.
Yeah,
I've been meeting mostly with the town managers and the fire chief going over the monthly reports. As far as the contracting go, that's more the town managers and Albert.
Mm-hmm, okay. Any questions for Joe? Now?
I do.
Yeah, please.
So I'm not involved with the representation from the select board here to the monthly meetings or however frequent they are. So I'm seeing a report here which indicates you're hitting your marks.
Yeah.
But within the report, I have some questions.
Okay.
Being a previous firefighter for the town of Lincolnville and a first responder, Rockland called in to cover.
Yes.
That to me is mutual aid, but
Correct.
there's a different terminology, MA from Rockland. Is that mutual aid, or does mutual aid have a different meaning?
No, mutual aid from Rockland,
Okay,
and we
so
also send in.
Is it someone different that wrote it and used a different terminology?
Would you know which report
Well,
that is? I
I'm
can-
looking at the report that was in our, it starts out July 3rd and goes through to, I'm gonna say probably the 6th of October.
Is
Maybe it's further than that.
Is it under the mutual aid given?
Yes, mutual aid asked for.
Okay.
on the front cover sheet, sorry.
Yeah, well, it says Rockland called to cover on the front sheet, and then as you go through the report, under mutual aid asked for, and also mutual aid given, it's MA to Union, MA to Rockland, but then it's MA from Rockland, MA from Rockland, and then on the next page, it's MA. So that means mutual aid.
Mutual aid, yes. Mutual aid, whether we call the mutual aid for us, like mutual aid to Rockland means we went into
Yeah.
Rockland, or we went into Union, or Rockland called in to cover would be the mutual aid. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I can
So-
clean that up and we can make it all, I can make that.
No, it's just a question. I just
Yep.
wanted to confirm that that meant the same thing. So,
Yep.
is it safe to say, to me, mutual aid for one town to call another is to help with a catastrophic event that they can't handle?
Or for coverage when they're already out, or when they're out, all their resources are being used and they need some
Okay,
help. Yeah.
so safe to say that most of these where all your resources are being used?
In one way or another, yes. Yep.
So-
If I called in Rockland, like the month I'm looking at right now, I believe is July.
Yeah.
I have July in
Okay.
front of me. On the 13th, 16th, and the 20th, those are right in the middle of the report. 2 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon, 2 in the morning. We ended up having to call Rockland in to cover.
Okay, so is there another report somewhere where there are timeframes and things to
Yeah.
connect to that? And where
yeah.
I'm going with this, I guess, is, this report indicates that you're hitting your contractual, agreement.
Yes.
But it also, to someone like me who's not involved with all these other meetings, is indicating that mutual aid is a crutch to make it happen, whether you can do it or not.
Well,
And that is a concern to me if that's the case.
no, in the contract, there's nothing that states about mutual aid. There's no parameters of how many times we can use it, how many times we have to use it. We've done research in other communities, other towns of what mutual aid is, and we're really on the low side statewide for mutual aid. Saco versus Biddeford, calling in, South Portland into Portland, that mutual aid's used all the time. Some help other towns more than others. There are some towns like July, Rockland, we used Rockland 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Looks like, 5, and Union once. So six mutual aid times. We activated mutual aid 6 times for the month of July. We were activated for mutual aid 4 times. We went and helped someone 4 times. We went to Rockland once, Union twice, then the ferry terminal for the islands.
Okay.
So it's a give and take. Some, like, again, it's harder. Rockland's full-time, you know, they back us up more than we back them up.
So the majority of your request for mutual aid is due to your resources are already out, not a staffing issue or anything like that?
There's staffing issues involved in that too. It's a national-wide crisis right now for EMS providers, for paramedics and everything. Everybody's feeling a pinch on this. So we are low on staffing. We're not where we should be. We've just hired a couple more paramedics into the fold, along with some more basic EMTs, which is filling out. They're actually doing some ride time today, get acclimated with the service. Should be starting within the next week or two. We're still actively pursuing a couple more paramedics to come in full time. We have actually changed the schedule around to make it look more, not look, but be more attractive for the paramedics that want to come on and work per diem. We've gone to a 24-hour shift, 2 24s a day. So that's what the paramedics want. That's what people want to come in and work. And that's what we're trying to do, is make it more enticing for them to come in. We have a sign-on bonus that we put out there for any paramedic that wants to come over. So we're actively trying to fill those, and we're better staffed now than we were 3 or 4 months ago.
Is there and I don't know, and I'm sorry, but I'm not the representative for the town for this, so I haven't really studied it as much as probably I should have. But is there a requirement for a staffing document on a monthly basis, a month out, for the towns to see, or is that not something that you people send to anybody?
No.
Okay.
In the contract, it's a percentage of how many, AB calls we can respond at the intermediate level.
Yeah.
CDE calls have to go at the paramedic level, and that's what we report on. The contract says that, you know, we have to.
But I mean, a month out to see who you've got scheduled for shifts. I don't mean
reporting to the town. No,
correct.
There's nothing.
So there's no requirement for
No.
that. Okay. Okay. The only other question that I had on that is the town of Lincolnville had a fire on the 17th of October on Route 1, the Dyer fire.
All right. What date
there
was that? I'll
it's-
pull that up right now.
Yep, it's my understanding there was a request for ambulance coverage at that event. And it's my understanding that Northeast canceled that. And at Northeast meeting with the participating towns, that question was asked, and the answer was it's under investigation. And I'm wondering if that investigation has revealed anything or has been completed.
Yes, it's been completed.
Can you reveal that information now, or does that need to go to the committee?
It deals with employee and outcomes, and I can't go into discipline of any employees publicly.
It was a personnel issue.
Personnel.
Correct, personnel
Okay,
issue.
okay.
But is that the date which?
17th? October 17th, I believe.
Did anyone die?
No, what I can say on that is it ended up being, there was some miscommunication, some misdirection, a lot of misunderstanding, and it has been addressed. I've since rectified that. We've put up a policy. I've pushed it out to all the paramedics and the intermediates in the building. It will not happen again.
Okay. So there's gonna be a report sent to the committee so that they know the answer to that question? I mean, I'm asking you this now because this is what I've heard from Joe Q Public.
Yep.
So, you know.
Yes, there will be. I can make that happen.
Okay.
Yep.
Fine. Thank you.
Because we meet quarterly, so that's.
Yeah. Okay.
Or we should meet quarterly.
We should meet quarterly.
Yes.
A lot of the conversations, because of the quarterly meetings not happening, they've been happening one-on-one with the town manager and the fire department. And I just spoke to David this week that we'll be setting those up here also to see what we can make work for everybody's schedule.
Great.
Perfect. That's all I got.
I just have one question.
Yep.
How does Rockland feel about the use of this amount of use of mutual aid? Have they commented that they don't have an issue with it? It's not affecting their their readiness for their city, because I have no idea.
Right. No, as we've had many, I meet with the chief, I try to meet with him every other month, thereabouts, as close as we can get to between the schedules. We've been in constant communication about staffing, what my staffing looks like. We've talked about that if I'm running low, I, you know, let him know that, you know, hey, you know, we're short-staffed or something like that. Example is the case of the fire that there was another fire that took place and we had to call a mutual aid because the truck was on another call. But as long as we're trying to keep up the communication with them, and that's where we fell down previously, probably, what is it, 2 years ago now, we actually had the meeting in here where it was talked about that the mutual aid was on a really it was spiking a lot because of our not being available. We've curbed that down, as you can see in the numbers. I guess that.
Okay.
Any other questions for Joe?
I think it's important for everybody to know that mutual aid has existed for a long period of time in the emergency world, whether it be law enforcement or fire or EMS. Unfortunately, none of those events where emergency services are required are scheduled, and no town that I'm aware of, or community that I'm aware of, can handle every emergency by themselves. And my opinion, it's an unattainable goal, to have a fire truck or I'll use fire for an example since we're talking EMS, I'll switch services. You know, trucks and manpower. There are a number of communities in our region in terms of fire that there's an automatic, if there's a structure fire, there's not even you don't even have to request mutual aid. There's an understanding with Waldo County Dispatch or Knox Communications that if there's a fire in ABC town, ABC gets toned out, as does D, E, and F, and all, you know, 3 other communities around, because there aren't the manpower and resources available always. And EMS is a little bit different because we have full-time people there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some communities choose to do that or are able to do that with fire, and some are not. And law enforcement, there are times when even that's pretty slim out there. So we need to keep in mind that it's good to be ready and do our best to prepare, but we're not going to be able to provide every service at all times without the assistance of others. I mean, that's what community is about and mutual aid is about.
It's the intersection of what we are willing to afford and what we.
If you want to overpay for coverage, you can do that. If you want to put 7 trucks on, so you never have to call mutual aid. Right. So, but my compliance director and IT director, he did a report from the whole state about mutual aid. I'll try to get a copy of that to get you to forward it out there. I mean, even MedQ with 4 trucks on a day is always calling South Portland or Westbrook for mutual aid. Westbrook's always, mutual aid's not a bad thing. It's always brought up when it's come to the ambulance for the 4 towns. Mutual aid has always been a negative. And I get it when we're short-staffed. The previous contracts had different parameters, and it was always, they call mutual aid because they were on a transfer. They call mutual aid because they were doing a transfer. With these new reports that we have here, if you have any questions about the mutual aid calls, I can snapshot, I can show you what the trucks were doing at the time. You know, looking at this, you know, I'll pick a couple right off the top of my head. 3 trucks on, a 4th emergency call comes in, I got a mutual aid it. If the intermediate truck is doing a transfer to Sussman House with somebody from Penn Bay and 2 calls come in and a 3rd one comes in, I've got a mutual aid it. So again, but we help each other, the communities help. I back up Union. I back up Rockland, not as much as Rockland backs up me, I get that. It's just it's the nature of the
Oh,
beast.
the reports shows that.
Right, yeah, no, and then, it's just the picture that mutual aid paints, that it's, you know, mutual aid's a great thing when it's used on the fire side, but when EMS uses it, it's a bad thing. But again, it's coming down, we're monitoring it, and we're doing the best we can. And I'd be more than happy, again, like I said, if you have any questions or anything on the report, email me the question, I'll get it back to you.
I just, like I said, I'm seeing this.
Nope.
And had questions on it, and
Yeah, no,
and you're here.
I'm glad I'm glad somebody reads it. It takes me a while to get it done, so I'm just, I'm
Yeah.
glad that somebody's actually looking at it and go,
Yeah.
and I'm emailing out to David by the 15th of every month.
Yep.
Okay.
And we appreciate how responsive you have been. I mean, I remember when I moved to the mainland, I grew up on an island, and I thought the concept of, I don't understand the disparaging nature that mutual aid is seen in here on the mainland, because where I grew up, if you needed more help, it involved planes, trains, and automobiles. And the fact that in a rural community such as Maine, this part of Maine, that we can help each other, is amazing.
Exactly.
And that there is an ambulance to show up is novel, and I think we're so,
Anything
we
that
forget.
anything I can do, just let me know. I'll be here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe, for coming out.
No problem.
Anything else on that particular topic? Okay, moving along to selectmen updates. Is there anyone from their particular corner of their specialized efforts when it comes to selectmening that they would care to update the board?
A lot going on.
And David.
Well, I think we had a very good and productive meeting with the dump committee, Midco Solid Waste, I should call it by the proper name. I think we ironed out some more stuff, got some more stuff lined up. We've getting closer to getting all of our committees working. I'm gonna be, the one I'm on, gonna be hopefully this week, next couple of days, we'll get dates set for the rest of the year when we're gonna meet and everything, and we have a meeting that I need to schedule when I find my other 4 members who can be there when, which I've gotta try to do that. And I would say for the most part, everybody came away understanding reasonably well where we ought to go and what we ought to do. There are some humps in the road, but I think they're ironable. That's my opinion. Kurt may have a different one.
Ironable sounds
No.
positive.
There were some bumps, but I think we're making progress. It certainly is. It's better than it was. The meetings have been shortened up, which is great. We are looking to elect a new chair sometime in the next couple of meetings, and that will change a few things. The 2 committees that I am involved in, the governance committee and the capital and strategic planning committee, we've had regular meetings, not right along, but we've just started having getting them back together, and we've had some progress, which is good. We have our budget coming up, which we really need to have finalized here pretty quick for the towns. That's going well. Everybody's right to the grindstone. So yeah, like David said, we do have some hurdles, but I'd like to say it's growing pains, but it's learning pains. It's not growing pains, it's learning pains. And we've identified that one of the biggest things that actually has stymied the board is the turnover, the regular turnover of directors. So I would request that the towns work diligently to keep your members engaged, and try to keep them there. doesn't necessarily have to be a board member, although that's recommended, because as we all know, you have to vote the will of the people of the town. But experience on all of these boards, whether it be town or otherwise, is very important. And this Midco Solid Waste thing is important. We got some big stuff going on, all the way up to the closure of our landfill, and that's huge. It's going to cost these towns some money, and we got to do it right. And the experience on the board is going to dictate how well it goes. I feel that's my personal opinion.
Mm.
That's all I got.
So Waldo County Budget Committee, I'll give a little update. No huge surprises in the proposed budget. I don't know if the board is aware, but Waldo County is unique in the sense that they self-insure the employees for health insurance, and have saved probably millions of dollars since they made that decision, I think 9 years ago. And there's a large increase this year because they had some large claims that they had to pay, and they hadn't been raising how much they had been raising for the health insurance, and so it just was evening out that had to happen. And records preservation, that was a large increase because there was a water main that had broken in the old sheriff's office that damaged a lot of really important records that need to be preserved, and mold grew, and then there needs to be steps taken to remediate that. So that's a one-time thing. Besides that, I think those were really the big ones. The Sheriff's Department has a hybrid SUV on order, which is very exciting. That should be here within the next few weeks. And they're going to run, they may be one of the first ones, actually, one of the first departments in the state to have one, which should pay off in a few years, and they'll run a bunch of tests and check the numbers, and if it's making sense for them, they'll order more in the future. And I think that's it.
Great. We just met with a representative from Northeast Mobile Health. I did participate in the first meeting of the member towns that, since I had been appointed, I know a number of meetings had been canceled. It was pretty non-eventful, to be honest. We basically read through the report, and that was it. So I did ask a couple of questions, which I did not get any answers for, namely 6 months out, so, 6-ish months out from the contract conclusion, what's their plans? No clear response on that. So I eagerly await the next one. Okay. Well, anything to report from the Department
Do I even have a
of
department?
Hitting Things? I don't know. I just don't want you to feel left out.
No, I haven't been able to even, I'm barely hanging out here.
Sorry. Okay, moving along. In order to act on the next agenda item, I need a motion, please.
I move that the board, I move that we suspend our meeting as the Board of Selectmen and that we convene as the Board of Assessors.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing. All those in favor? Thank you very much. You want to give a little preamble, David?
Just that a property owner was concerned with their land value. Came and met with Vern. Vern said, well, you're assessed like everybody else. The property owner said, well, there's some waste, what they referred to as wasteland or wetland areas. Vern said, well, in essence, if you can demonstrate that, you know, we'll take that into consideration. The person went out and hired a consultant to delineate the wetlands and provided a map that showed a portion being, I don't know if that was on this thing or not, a portion of their 5-acre parcel being in wetlands and therefore not usable for any particular purpose. And so Vern recalculated that to consider that waste or real land, and is recommending an abatement of $44,900 in value.
Okay, any questions about this? Can I have a motion, please?
I move that the board grant abatement number 2019-06 to Kenneth Rosbach in the amount of $691.46 to correct an error in the land assessment value.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And can I have another motion so we can get on with things?
I move that we adjourn our meeting as the Board of Assessors and reconvene as the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And David, would you like to give a description?
Yeah. Midsummer, I was contacted by Richard Brothers, who owns a property at the end of Morton Road, concerning whether or not the road was a town road or a private road. The town had been maintaining that road up into the farmhouse for a lifetime. So once again, you had a copy of the letter. We said, you know, we believe it's a town road. We're required to continue to upkeep and maintenance of this road. He mentioned at the time maybe we would consider discontinuing a portion of the road. Bernard and I went out in, I don't remember when, sometime prior to my incident, and had a nice conversation again with Mr. Brothers. He's concerned with when the plow truck goes, it's a gravel road, kind of looks like a driveway, ends at his farmhouse, and doesn't necessarily like the way it gets beat up a little bit with plow trucks and everything else, and can you do something different? And the answer is, well, we could, except the only place we can turn around is where we've been turning around forever. And we had a conversation with him about possibly constructing a new turnaround or a different turnaround, or a turnaround in a different location, I guess the best way to put it. There is a relatively nice site just inside the property line as Morton Road enters into Mr. Brothers' property that Bernard thought would or could work. Mr. Brothers, we followed that up with a note to him saying this is what we're thinking, and we being Bernard and I would be supportive of that concept to the board if Mr. Brothers concurred that would be a workable solution. He seems to be on board with it based on my conversation with him of last week, and so we put it on the agenda before we invested any more time and effort into this, to make sure we had some concurrence from the board that this seemed like a good idea. We're talking of looking at, discontinuing, this is a total guess, 400 or 500 feet of roadway and having an official turnaround in a different location, so that it would be distinguished where anybody traveling down the Morton Road would say, oh, this is the end of the town road, and you'd turn around and come back out.
Beyond, so whereas now, or since time immemorial, it's been a town road all the way up to his house, and he's at the end of the road. And
Yeah.
now this is just saying from this place where it just enters his property, there'd be a turnaround, and the rest would be sort of considered his driveway.
Yeah, we would
4,500
look
feet.
to, when I say we, ultimately these decisions are made by the townspeople.
Right.
Because the board doesn't have the, unless the townspeople give you the authority, you don't have the authority to acquire or dispose of town-owned property.
Right.
A road is considered town property. And so we'd have to memorialize the agreement that basically said we, the town, would have the ability to be on this portion of property, because some of this isn't where the road is now. And in exchange for this, we're willing to give up that. And then that part would then become his responsibility to do with it what any property owner would do. If he wants to, tear up the driveway, tear it up. You wanna maintain it your way, maintain it your way. You don't wanna maintain it, don't.
Well,
So the turnaround, David, that's something the town would construct up there?
Well, we haven't
Good
discussed,
question.
we haven't discussed the construction of this as yet. We've discussed the concept of this is where
Yeah.
we would take the road. The road would be, the current road would become part of the turnaround. And then just as you crossed into, or beyond, Mr. Brothers' property line, there's a field area to the right. So that's the preferred side, because plow trucks can then pull in and then swing and push all the snow to the right.
Yeah.
Plow ahead, back up, pull in the turn, plow the snow that way, and then back up to where the road was and pull out, go the other way.
So.
And the
well,
same thing for, school buses or public turning.
So not to interrupt anybody's questioning, but largely what we need to determine here is there a majority of the board that is interested in moving this conversation forward before we get mirrored in the details? And, yeah, and David, do you need a motion, or is a general nodding of the head okay?
Well, for me, a general nodding of the head is okay. I mean, whatever comes of this, has to come back to you folks.
Right.
And then ultimately, if everything falls into place, it would actually be presented to the voters. But, Brennan and I have been out there a couple of times. I've done some research on the right-of-way information, or the lack thereof. Vernon's contributed. That farm actually at one point was part of his family's farm, so he's been in and out of there his lifetime. And for a good long time, he's, been maintaining the road for the town, so he's aware of what's gone on and what hasn't. And, we could spend a lifetime talking to people and not get anywhere. And sometimes we have to stop, or we have to come to you and say, hey, we've taken the first couple of steps. Do we want to continue down this road?
Right.
Every pun intended.
So you just mentioned something, you just mentioned school bus.
Yeah.
Is the school bus going in there or potentially?
I don't believe it does currently, but
Should a family.
any town way.
Okay, so a turnaround would have to be big enough to turn a school bus.
Yeah, you'd want to be able to turn a
Okay.
plow truck, almost any,
Yeah.
you want to be able to turn any street legal vehicle.
I've just never known a school bus to go in that road.
No, but,
But if it is a municipally maintained roadway.
I lived in that farm and they never come and got us.
times they are changing.
Yeah, but now that you practically have to carry the child.
I
onto the
walk
bus,
to
so.
school every day, both ways uphill. No.
Barefoot.
From that farmhouse.
In the
Barefoot and
snowstorm.
blindfolded, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, but you brought up an excellent point. There are a long list of costs associated with entertaining this notion, and there will be attorney's fees and documenting fees and not to mention the physical cost to
Make that turnaround.
correct.
Yeah.
And so have you had any sort of discussion with the property owner
Not beyond.
about the costs that will be incurred?
Not beyond the concepts, and there's a recognition that there are some vegetation removal, tree removal adjacent to the current roadway, and the fact that we're gonna have to make provisions for drainage, because.
Is it
water's-
too early for us to weigh in on that, or?
No, I
feel
mean-
like it's sort of also contingent on moving this conversation
Yeah,
forward.
well, it's certainly at some point, we're going to have a discussion with, the board, the townspeople, the current property owner about the cost. I mean, somebody's gonna have to foot the bill.
Right.
And, you know, there's a potential, however minuscule, savings of not having to maintain, for us, 400 or 500 feet of road. May not even be that far. Yeah, probably 400 feet.
Yeah, I think it is.
It's a ways in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's pros and cons to everything, but certainly the more criteria that can be established now, the more honest discussion we can have with all parties involved to say, we're interested, but, you know, we don't want to shell out any money, or we'd split it with you, or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
we
David?
foot the bill.
I can't remember, and it's my faulty memory on this. Was this one of the ones about 7 years ago when we tried to close a bunch of roads? Was this one of the ones
No.
that we tried to close? It wasn't.
It was not.
Okay, because I'm just curious, because the townspeople slapped us pretty good on that one and said
Yep.
that they didn't want to close any roads.
Yep.
But I don't want to go through all
Yeah,
the
it's
motions again
Right.
to get slapped one more
Well,
time.
Right.
this
I
is
think
a
if you
little
bring it-
different, though.
Right.
He wants it ended where his property starts.
And we
Right.
at that time, we just didn't want to pay the money out anymore, and they
Correct.
were basically private driveways for all practical
Well,
Basically.
those were the properties we were trying,
That's right.
those
This
were
looks
driveways.
This looks like a private driveway too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sitting here looking at the picture.
There's no one beyond his property?
No.
No.
So this is all this, okay.
Yeah.
And
This did.
in addition to the ones that David referred to a couple years ago that the select board presented to the town, we have had a couple of others where property owners have approached us, or we've approached the property owner, and they willingly agreed. I'm thinking Deantown Road, off from
Yeah.
Youngtown Road. The owner said, if you discontinue the public easement, you know, we can make this all happen and there won't be any damages paid. Because usually when you discontinue a public road, you pay damages to
Yeah.
whoever
Well,
you
see,
know,
there's
is
a
on the
very
road.
good question right there. That's a good comment. Is he looking for a tax change as well? Because
Yeah.
it's not gonna be a town road right to his doorstep.
No, you know, and depending on, well, let me get the other one out of my mind. The other one that was in my mind is Faxon Farm Road. We discontinued up off of Green Acre Road, and the owner willingly accepted that. There are, and we haven't
When you say
just,
that, you mean whatever costs were incurred
The-
from that process?
yeah, no,
The-
well, we did the paperwork. We
Okay.
prepared the discontinuous paperwork. We prepared whatever legalese had to be done to discontinue the roads. But on those roads, we were getting rid of them, and we weren't putting a new turnaround on them because they were gonna end it they intersected with a public road.
Oh, okay.
And we were gonna get rid of this piece and just have this road over here.
All right.
Value, I haven't had any discussion with Mr. Brothers regarding his valuation. You could argue either way. Does it enhance the value of your property by not having
Right.
Public
anybody and their
access.
brother driving up in your dooryard, turning around and driving out? Or does it diminish your value because the town's no longer plowing? Well, and sanding and shaping and grading. He approached us because he didn't like the way we were maintaining the road, in essence. He didn't like people turning around in his driveway or on our road that he looks at as his driveway. And really, my opinion, I mean, I'm not in the real estate world, the marketability of that project or that property doesn't hinge on whether the town road goes to his front doorstep or turns around when you get on. Matter of fact, I'd probably argue it might enhance the value of your property.
If it was privatized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
Well, I could see that being a wash.
We won't know till years from now when that gets sold.
Yeah, well, and let's just take it back. I will just say that because this is a project that this property owner is interested in pursuing, I am not interested in spending town money to make it happen.
I will agree with that. That was what I was gonna say is if this what he's asking for left on change, like, you know, if what he's asking for there was no turnaround put in, then what he's asking for would cause the town to incur greater difficulty in maintaining the road, right? So he's saying he wants his life to be easier by not having the town come all the way up to his road. But right now, the best option for the town, cost-wise for maintenance, is to actually continue doing it the way it is. And so if it's privatized up to his property line, that makes it more difficult for the plows. If I would think then therefore if he wants the town to incur that hardship, for lack of a better word, I don't want to overemphasize, but for the town to incur that inconvenience, if he was willing to bear the cost of putting in the turnaround, that would seem like a suitable compromise. Where, like, all right, we'll leave you alone up from, those last 400 or 500 feet. If you'll just give the town the ability to turn around here, and you pay for it. It seems like a hard sell along the lines of what David's saying. If the select board got slapped down on this kind of an idea before, when it didn't even it wasn't even asking for more it just seems like a hard sell to bring to the town and say, this guy wants to do this, it's going to cost the town a bunch of money to help him do it.
There is a little bit, also a little bit maybe perhaps of a parallel that could be drawn with Fernald's Neck Road.
Mm.
Several years ago, we were approached by the property owner there, and the road went
Right
beside the house. 50 feet away. I'm just picking that number out of the air. And the owner wanted to relocate or had the road relocated, and they actually paid the expense of having the survey done, the engineering done, and then the construction done, and townspeople, with the understanding that when it was done, this was going to be discontinued and the new road was going to be built. And so if the message from the board is we're satisfied with the concept, but we would like this to be done besides staff time, my time and Bernard's time, we can convey that message.
Dude,
I think it seems reasonable.
how much do you think the town would save not maintaining those several hundred feet of roadway annually?
Not a lot.
Drop the bucket.
I'm gonna venture a guess that it gets shaped up maybe once a year. We would have some savings. I don't know how much measurable it would be the next time we bid out like snow plowing.
Yeah.
But would you? Because now we're creating a turnaround that would have to be plowed, sanded, back and fill. So,
but we do that up in the dooryard now.
Yeah.
But so then there's a short stretch of road, 400 feet, that we're not plowing.
They'd say,
Yeah.
that's it.
And
Is the curvature of the turnaround going to be 400 feet? I don't know.
no,
I mean, my back of the napkin figuring is that with the next bidding out of our next plowing and sanding contract and whatever contractual grading, gravel, the cost of just the overall increase of everything getting more expensive, it's not even worth
right. It's probably not
having a
measurable.
conversation.
Hopefully the town goes on for an infinite number of years. The less roads we have, the less costs we're going to incur. It's just, not that the turnaround's going to be free. There'll still be maintenance associated with that, but we're doing some maintenance now. The thing with these low volume public roads that we have is, the reality is we probably don't do a whole lot to them for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then it's, you know,
What it
8
is,
loads of gravel and a little shaping up, and we walk
mostly
away.
it's municipally provided plowing. It's really
Yeah.
what it comes down to that these properties benefit from. And if it's no longer of value to you and you don't want that intrusion in your
Being done for no
space.
reason.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, so
I'm good with moving this along,
Yeah.
as long as we can come to an agreement that this doesn't cost the taxpayers.
Yeah, if he pays for all these
Yeah.
things outlined, that's fine.
yeah.
I will convey that.
And so if everyone's feeling positive and moving in the same direction, then the next step will be for all of us to have a brief conversation with our attorney
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
identify
well,
the next steps.
Yeah, I think I can convey this to him, make sure he's still on board. I mean, it's gonna be kinda hard till we figure out what the costs are, but at least he can recognize that there will be costs associated
Yeah.
with it. And then if he's okay with that, we'll try to figure that out and start marching.
Great,
Okay.
excellent. Moving along, so we're gonna finalize a conversation, regarding scheduling and reporting for committee chairs and department heads. You guys, it was on the last agenda, but you figured it was a better full board conversation.
Yeah,
Which
I
I-
think the comment that I made was any committee that has a direct responsibility for overseeing and or maintenance of town infrastructure
Yep,
was top of the list.
yep,
And I know a lot of these, not that every committee is very important, but,
The deeper the infrastructure, the more.
correct, yeah, correct.
yeah, well put. I mean, I look at this list, David, that you put together, and me, myself, and I feel that any information the board can get from the individuals doing town's work is valuable information and a good discipline for anyone who signs up to be playing a role for the town. And I think that running it through that filter that you suggested of that hierarchy of needs, so to speak, and whether it's budget implications, could we say?
Yep.
Helping inform the frequency or importance of the report, but not to give you more to do, but I feel like codifying and formalizing sharing of information will be so valuable, particularly if there are new board members, who don't have the years of experience, and having that information as a little helping guide to get a little further on down the road. So,
Well, we have two, excuse me, two similar yet dissimilar things.
yeah,
The list we did a couple of years ago, and we've tried to group things that had commonality together. I mean, like, I'm just looking at April, you had Recreation Commission and McGonagall Dam and Bandstand Trustees and Lakes and Ponds and Inland Harbor Mess, there's kind of that water recreational component there on the hopes that people could come and say, spring's coming, we're gonna be ready for summer, and
Sure.
these are the types of things. So those were more for board presentations. And then there was the list of who for reports have been, and I outlined the several that were in various levels of getting closer, actually, for you to see a report that's meaningful. That's the other thing. We want to make sure that once we start filing these or getting them, that they actually have some information that's worthwhile to you. So we want to make sure I get comments back once those come. But then there were some that was, you know, I'm just trying to look down the list. Do you want things from the electrical inspector more than an annual report? Or, you know, a lot of these people are, this is going to be a learning curve for them too. They're more hands-on than they are, you know.
Well, I don't know if a quarterly report makes sense for a lot of these. However, I can't tell you how valuable it was getting to meet with our electrical inspector and talk about what have you been up to in the last couple of years? What are things that you feel like are coming down the pipeline? What should we be aware of? That was so informative, and just knowing, having that concept, a very, very basic understanding of what it is that individual is doing for us was so fantastic, you know. And whether it is yourself, David, as, you know, the town clerk, saying, you know, these are the things that I'm seeing. This is, I think one could get wrapped up in the overly burdensome aspect, and sometimes saying no new information is in fact information in and of itself, and there is value in that. The yawning silence coming from, say, critical department heads is not valuable, nor is vague anecdotal information, which is so often shared to us verbally. It's not useful. It should go, there should be information on a page in a file that can be referenced by anyone who wants to know it, exclusive of or outside of meeting minutes. Meeting minutes are great, but they're not everything.
Right, and they're certainly not a transcript.
So
Correct.
are we outlining right now who we want a report from and how often we want a report from them? Is that what we want to take away from this agenda item?
Well, I guess for me, you know who I've started working with in terms of preparing a meaningful report. And then I was starting to stumble to say, well, you know, where do we stop? And or how frequently do you want some of these things, because, you know, there comes a point of diminishing returns, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, you know something, David, this is a really good start. And myself, I would like to hear, at a minimum, quarterly from our fire chief, because I feel he's got his finger on the pulse of everything that's going wrong. And I just think we need to know if everything's okay. Is there something that we need to do that you just think you don't want to talk to us about? You know, that type of thing. And I say quarterly, maybe more, maybe monthly. I don't know, but my particular opinion on that would be at least quarterly for him.
Yeah, on the first one, not to interrupt, but I just did.
Yeah.
For road commissioners, the inland and the marine harbor masters, fire chief, code enforcement, we've been discussing doing these I've been discussing with them doing them at least quarterly.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for, like, the animal control, she'd been doing a monthly report. I'm not gonna tell her, oh, go to quarterly. You know,
Right.
it's in her,
Yeah,
it's
it
in her
works.
mindset to already do
Right.
monthly reports the way she does it.
Oddly, it makes sense for her to be doing it monthly, even though it's not major infrastructure thing, but it's the way it is, that kind of
Frequency of information.
human and animal relationship. Yeah, because
Right.
animals, yeah.
So the, with regards to the road commissioner, I think that's great. You know, and Bernard is gonna come to us, or at least I know I feel he's gonna come to us if he's got problems. I know he will. The rec commission, I would really, until we get that on their feet, and I think it's great that we've got the volunteers that we do on that team. But until I have some confidence in what's going on there, and the reason I say that is I don't feel that we should have to reach out and say, hey, did you get the stuff done that's been scheduled from Sportsfield? You know, has that been done yet? I just don't think we should have to do that. Whether it be them come to a meeting or whatever, or just a email to someone, but that's not happening yet. So that's what's gonna change my confidence in them.
Well, the other part of this is, I mean, you gotta separate employees from committees.
Understood.
Because employees, the people on this list in the newsletter, not this list, but the newsletter list, they're all getting paid. And
Yeah.
not to say you can't expect things from your volunteers, but your paid people, you can say, we asked for this, you didn't give us this, we're gonna find somebody, you know.
Well, and I think going back to, and I don't know if it makes sense, and I am certainly happy to volunteer to sit down with David, and I think anyone who's paid by the town to do town work on the payroll should either quarterly or at least annually report to the select board in a written report, and it could be budget implications, and then going outside of paid town employees, looking at committee chairs, etc., and vetting that scale of budget importance, because the rec commission is responsible for a significant amount of money. And so often that's the rub, right? There isn't adequate planning for the funds, and then so I don't know, unless David, you feel like you can just take it and run with it based on the feedback you've heard here.
No, I'm not prepared to do that quite yet. I mean, just looking at the employees for a moment.
Yes.
I mean, each one of those gets at least the opportunity, if not the requirement, right now of an annual report. If you go look in your town report, I think all those people write things for the town report, although I'm not 100% sure of that, but pretty close. I know the parking attendant doesn't, because I'm the only parking attendant and I didn't write anything for the town report, and there may be others. But,
Well, that's, I feel like maybe the issue there is timing.
Yeah. And, well, so if you look at, take off the harbor masters and road commissioner and code officer and fire chief for a moment. If you just look at the ones with all the question marks, are there people there or positions there that you really don't want a
No.
report from?
No. I think, yes, they, with more or less interest in the town report, are included. However, I think getting those types of reports this time of year is much more valuable to
Budgeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and speaking for myself, there could be even the smallest little detail that will, tingle something in my brain for informing conversations that we then go on to have in the next couple of months.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's just say yes to all of those positions with question marks. And is there anybody on there that you would like to see something more frequently than quarterly?
Unless they're otherwise doing so, I can't see the need to have a greater frequency.
Okay, so yes and quarterly. If that ever changes, let me know and we'll change it.
We're saying yes quarterly to all these question marks
Yep.
in the newsletter? Okay.
Even if it's nothing new to report,
I don't give them that option. Because you might get that every time, but
No.
But there's no way. I mean, all these individuals are busy doing things,
Yeah.
you know, it's,
Right, so that would give them a chance to say no.
And maybe we're already doing this, but I would like to hear from the chairs of all these committees at least once a year.
Yeah.
But perhaps we're already doing
So then flipping to the thing that's behind tab 10,
right.
that's the current list. And now this is a mix mash of both some departments and some committees. Some of these are spelled out in the, in ordinances that, like we just had the harbor committee and the harbor master here in early November, because the ordinance says in the month of November, thou shalt do this. And we picked, and then I'll pick on Bernard as road commissioner. He usually comes in March, and then he comes again in October. One to tell you, hey, spring's coming up. You know, this is what's ahead of us for spring and summer. And then once in the fall to say, hey, we've wrapped up the summer and fall work, and this is what's ahead of us for winter. So there's multiple times that they show. Some of the others are just singular once a year that we just kind of picked and stuck in there. Are there people or organizations that you're aware of that you'd like to see more frequently or at a different time, or that's the kind of, and I note that we'll cross off the first one in July because that doesn't exist anymore, but
I hate to
I was gonna
beat on
say,
the
yeah.
rec commission,
Yep.
but I really feel that we need to see them.
well, they were supposed to be here in October.
Yeah.
It would happen.
Yeah. So,
They've gone through a little transition again, and
yeah.
but yep.
I just feel that that's a huge thing. There's a lot that needs to go with it. And until I feel until we get a handle on it, I just feel that, summer is a busy month for our infrastructure outside, and they have a lot to do with it.
So do you
Yeah.
think something midsummer makes sense? So right now they're bookending sort of spring and late fall,
I think so, yes.
so
Midsummer.
tucking them in July.
Yeah.
So having
Okay.
them additional, or are you looking to lighten the load? I think that originally was set up that way so that they'd come in spring and say, yep, we're gonna be ready, or we are ready. And this, kind of like the road commissioner, this is what we're gonna be, hit the ground running, or it's ready to go, or we're already playing. And then our fall wrap up was to say, yep, we've done everything we had hoped to do this summer, and
Yeah.
we'll see you in the spring. But if you want a midsummer report, it's easy enough to add them in there.
It's not going well. We need help right now.
Personally, I do.
Okay.
For right now.
For them to come in. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, I agree.
And these are flexible. I certainly, I think all the committees know, or the chairs know, and the departments know that if there's something that's, hot for the board, they don't have to wait till, February to come in and say, hey, I was aware of something last, September, but I had to wait till February to come. If they wanna come or need to come, they come.
The Route 1 Advisory Committee is defunct currently.
Choice was to not appoint anybody to that.
Yes. So do you need anything else more from us now, David?
I think I just added to the to-do list, but that's okay. Yep.
Okay.
No, I think that's good. That clears the water, or clears the air, so.
Okay. We have the treasurers and payroll warrants to approve and sign.
I move that the board approve the treasurer's and payroll warrants.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And is there any other business?
I just wanted to mention that the giving tree is up at the town office
Thank you.
for
That's what I
anyone,
wanted to remember.
for anyone that would like to make a child smile at Christmas.
When did it go up?
Last week, I believe, and
Are there still any tags left
there are
on
still
it?
some tags left. People can come and pick a tag or two, or how many ever you wish. We want to know which tag you take, because we want to make sure that that actually gets fulfilled, and bring back whatever's on the tag unwrapped, and then we get it wrapped here, and then it gets distributed to the people in need. So
Last year, I always get at least one tag, and last year they were gone in like,
Yeah, we tried.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, come on!
That's what's so good about our town.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
awesome. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for reminding.
Absolutely.
Any other town business? Seeing nothing, can I entertain a final motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor?
I'm gonna pass
I was
the
just guessing that was.
abatement down that needs a signature, and
Ding,
please
ding,
make
ding,
sure
correct
you
answer.
sign the warrants. As soon as Hopalong is over, then we'll shut off.
Messing things
Oh,
up, signing
David.
red.
Uh-oh. Is that okay, David? Red pen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man.
As long as it doesn't.
Ink is
disappear.
ink.